Now then, there are many reasons to teach British students vocational and technical skills. For their sake, for the sake of the country's productivity, and for what we've just been talking about, to provide a local workforce that means you don't need to rely on immigration. But the heads of more than 100 colleges have written an open letter to the government today. They say they have a moral duty to speak out because the government is sleepwalking into a disaster in the way that it's reforming vocational qualifications in England. And that's because they say 100,000 16-year-olds every year will have no access to further education because ministers have failed to put in place what they call a coherent implementation plan. And they say there are teething problems with the new exams, which mean the change should happen more slowly. Dr. Nikos Savvas is Chief Executive of West Suffolk College. He drafted the letter and he told me about a problem with last year's core paper in health and science.
The exam was different to the material that was set in the curriculum, which meant that all the students failed. If we didn't have an alternative qualification to switch the students, which we did, then the entire cohort of students for health and science would have nothing to show after 2 years of studying. That would have been catastrophic for the futures of the students. Because it hasn't yet been phased out and it was there as a backup, we were able to very quickly move the students onto the BTEC and then give a qualification that is recognized by the employers and the universities to the students, and then the students were able to progress.
Now, your worry is what? That unless you continue to have the BTECs as a backup for another couple of years, that there will be further mistakes that can't be rectified?
Any new implementation will have mistakes in there. Unless we can have a backup, that means that the students, if they fail, they will have nothing to go to. But it's bigger and deeper than that. The way the T-level qualifications are currently set up means that about 100,000 students a year will not be able to progress on the T-levels. That means that 500,000 students over 5 years will not be able to become the country's skilled workers that we so desperately need.
And this is what? Because the entry requirements to the T-levels are too high and there is no alternative for them.
The entry levels are too high. The bridging between a level 2 qualification and the very specific T-level narrow focus that exists doesn't bridge the gap.
If the government's current plan played out, what would happen to those 100,000 students a year?
Well, these students will be left stranded and they will have no suitable qualification pathway to progress to. So they will have to leave school and find some sort of work that doesn't require anything above a GCSE. We want to increase the productivity of this country. Do we want to leave 500,000 students every 5 years just with GCSEs?
The response to your letter, which is quoted in the Financial Times today, is our reforms to qualifications, including the introduction of T-levels, are all part of our driving mission to make sure more young people gain the skills they need to progress into great jobs. They're now being delivered successfully by over 160 providers, and we're pressing ahead with our reforms so young people have the skills employers need. So it doesn't sound as though they are accepting the criticism that you're making.
And that is why we felt it is our duty as leaders of education to combine our voice with the voice of the Education Select Committee. If we feel that someone, no matter if it is the government or anywhere else, which is sleepwalking into a disaster, we feel it is our moral duty to speak out and stand up for the students we represent.
In terms of what you're asking, the change required, it would be what? Just to slow down on the transition in order to ensure that those T-levels that do exist are good enough, but also what? To provide another route for students who don't make it into T-levels?
All we're saying is just slow down the reforms. Please keep the qualifications that exist as a backup. Work with us in implementing and test the T-levels. And then together we can create the workforce and the qualifications of the future.
Dr. Nikos Savvas.